This is Retrospective Facilitation, a podcast for facilitators that want to make their retrospectives even more effective. Listen to industry experts, authors, and executives that advocate powerful retros share their stories and insights on how to reflect, adjust, and become more effective. To receive updates on the latest episodes, subscribe to our newsletter at thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com and win a chance to ask questions to our guests. Welcome back to the show. Hopefully, if you watched the past episodes, your retrospective have become a bit more effective. Maybe you've explored new things. We've talked about a few different approaches, like if your retrospective is stale and if you handle only business as usual items. Well, what's the goal of a retrospective? We had people talking about that. We had double loop learning, the 5 steps framework. Today we have Adam Light, and Adam has been looking and using the Toyota Kata for increasing the effectiveness of his retrospectives, specifically the Toyota Learning Kata. So if you're interested in making your retrospectives even more effective, listen on. All right, so Adam, thank you for joining the show, and I'm happy to have you here today.
Yeah, it's great to be talking to you.
And so today we're gonna talk a little bit about a subject that Adam has been looking at for the last few years, which is looking beyond retrospectives. Is that right?
That's right. I have been, for about the past 5 or 6 years, I have been using the kata and the improvement kata and working with coaches and scrum masters and retrospective facilitators to adopt that model and the practices related to it to sort of extend beyond what they might be able to do with the retrospectives they learned in Scrum Master class.
Cool. So what were they doing with the retrospectives, those folks? Where did they find kind of like the boundary?
Yeah, well, people tell me that, some people just got a kind of a 2-day Scrum Master class and they're saying, oh, well, you do start, stop, and continue, and you use voting dots, and then you pick one thing. But most of the people that are really interested and get involved have been doing it for a while, and some of the challenges that people tell me when I do workshops and presentations is that their retrospectives, they have trouble working with teams just in a retrospective format inside that box, kind of finding what is the true constraint on our work. How can we set big goals that are kind of systemic, that include more than just our team, and then break those bigger improvements into smaller chunks while keeping the focus over time. And they'll also say that They would like to have measurement built in to their process so that they can recognize improvement over time, because sometimes it seems like, well, as we get further and further into things and kind of the early gains that are in our team level maybe are like really obvious, have been achieved, if you want to call that the low-hanging fruit, then we get to the point where it feels like I'm pouring energy in, but it's kind of like I'm adding a centimeter of water to a lake or something like that. And so, I think the level went up, but with all the waves and the overall size of the pool, it doesn't really show. I can't really feel it. So how can we measure when we're making these small incremental improvements toward a big systemic goal? How can we measure and know that we're making progress, both for our own kind of feedback to help us want to keep going, and also so we can tell and show others that we're working on something, big and complex, but we are making progress.
Cool. So how's Toyota Kata helping with that, and how does it integrate with retrospectives or goes?
Yeah, well, to step back just a little bit and kind of describe for your listeners who don't know or can't, not quite precise on what the Toyota Kata is. Toyota Kata is kind of two components, and they are the improvement kata, which is mainly what I'll talk about, and then there's a coaching kata as well. And the source of this is a gentleman who's sort of one of my mentors, somebody that I really respect a lot. His name is Mike Rother, and he came out of the graduate program at the University of Michigan, and they have, there's a guy there, Jeffrey Liker, and his students have basically made a research program of studying Toyota. So Mike went to Toyota many times and studied, and his earlier work was on value stream mapping, and he literally kind of wrote the book on value stream mapping. It's called Learning to See. And then, so practicing and teaching people about value stream mapping, he began to look more deeply at Toyota and kind of what is it that, so value stream mapping is a tool that you can use to make your production process visible. But what is the, behind that or deeper, like how are managers and employees at Toyota using scientific thinking in their day-to-day work in order to make changes and make improvements and adjustments, really, because sometimes improvements are just like responding to a change that you need to respond to in order to kind of keep things running, right? That counts as improvement. So the Toyota Kata is not something that Mike, invented, but more he'll say that he discovered, and he discovered it by looking closely at how people were actually behaving and what they were doing, and then interviewing them and talking to them at Toyota, because for them it was kind of part of their culture. It wasn't, it was what they did. It wasn't explicit. They weren't writing it down. It was just the way that they managed processes and people and everything. And so what the
Cool.
improvement kata specifically gives you beyond retrospectives is saying we have a goal. So rather than looking in the rear view mirror, say what just happened and what can we learn from that, you're looking forward and saying, where do we want to go? What's our goal? And we have a short-term goal and we have a long-term goal. So we can kind of make alignment to those two things. So as we're moving toward this goal, what are the obstacles that we see in front of us rather than the obstacles that we see behind us? So we sort of turn the retrospective around and give it a forward-looking view on things. And then we still try to pick one obstacle and work on it, but we're looking forward rather than backward, if that makes sense.
Cool. So sometime in retrospective, we do like divergent activities where we do things like what would perfect look like, and again, focusing. All this is assuming that we found our retrospective focus. We have like an area of improvement that we want to go for. Is this similar than that? And from what I was reading, one thing that struck me is that the improvements might not be within the team control. So sometimes I use this thing called circles
Yep.
and soup to determine what is an improvement that the team control, influence, or is in the soup. And if it's in the soup, it might be like a company policy, and the team can still do something about it. The team can still determine how they react to it. But when I was reading online about Kata, it seems like these objectives might be past the gray zone, as they described it, in this area. That how does the team get the sense of agency to get
Sure.
there? Is there like recommendations
Yeah.
in
So, I
the?
mean, that is, that sort of depends on the company and what you're doing, of course. But there is the idea that you're looking at a more systemic thing and the team is just part of that. So rather than saying like the team is the center of the universe and we go out and try to find stuff to work on, with the improvement kata, there's very much more of a like holistic or even a little bit of a, it's not top down, it's not bottom up, it's a balance, right? And so there's work that you would do. So you mentioned like divergent and convergent thinking, and those are kind of like facilitation stances or ways of thinking or ways of orienting people to talk about things. So you might use divergent thinking in order to, as you said, define a more perfect version of the present, and that's what we would call usually like a challenge. So this is, we're saying like, where do we want to be as a whole organization in 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, and then each team or each component of the organization is going to have a contribution to that. And so you're looking and saying like, well, what is my contribution to the overall goal? And of course, you can do it at a more local level as well, particularly when you're getting started. But that's another kind of difference in perspective. And one sort of connecting point there is a lot of companies are interested in OKR, objectives and key results. And it's very, very much in spirit, it's very much aligned with that, where you have
Can we maybe briefly just describe for the user the objective and key results? So objective is something that like a destination that we want to go,
yeah,
and the key result should be like how do we measure that? How do we get there?
yeah,
Is
exactly.
that
What are
a good summary?
Yeah, so like in the improvement kata, we call those we have sort of outcome measures, like maybe we want to increase revenues from $20 million to $50 million. And then we have sort of key results that might be different. Like for the product or engineering, it might be we need to deliver these features, or we need to deliver these major platform changes more rapidly or on a certain timetable. Whereas for sales, that might be we need to have 5 times as many prospects so we can sell the features once we have them, kind of thing. So you're going to have different key results depending on your orientation or your perspective relative to that shared goal. But the idea is usually to have a goal. In the improvement kata, we're saying we want to have a goal that's a better, more perfect version of the present, where we're obtaining different results from our work. Because if you just keep doing things the same way and expect to get different results, that usually doesn't work very well. You need to look at the results, but also the way that you'll be working to get those results. And sometimes you have to make some significant changes in order to keep getting better.
So with this like improvement kata, like is the change happening like from the top up? Are those objective that are set? Are they coming from upper management, or is the team just deciding, well, that's where we're going, and we're gonna try and plow through and go through the grays onto that target condition?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a difference in when you go to like a lean manufacturing conference, or conference like a lean conference with people from manufacturing. You don't run into the people from the assembly line, right? You're running into their managers, and that's not necessarily because those people aren't empowered or they're not treated well as employees. It's just a little bit different kind of work. And so that's part of the work of kind of adjusting the Toyota Kata sort of standard or original way of thinking about things to software development or software product development. So sometimes I get pushback from people. They're like, "Oh, this sounds like it's all top down," and I don't. It doesn't need to be that way. The idea is to create a connection, because people who are more senior in the organization hierarchy usually have a different span of control, and sometimes that means they can see things that you can't at a team level, and sometimes it means that they can't see things that you can. So there needs to be a two-way communication, and it doesn't mean that you have to start from one way or the other, especially when you're getting started. If we think about going beyond retrospectives, a lot of times the team can set a goal that's longer term, which is still sort of squarely within its field of view or span of control. So, for example, a team or a set of teams perhaps might want to increase their frequency of releases from every 6 weeks to every 2 weeks. And so they might say, okay, well, we have this goal. A lot of things have to change. Technology has to be improved, or our use of it has to be improved. Everybody needs to agree on how they're going to do this. Maybe we need to staff differently so we can be around when the release needs to go out and needs to be supported. So all of those things, you can imagine, things, a better view, a view of a better future where we release more frequently, and as a result, we capture more value for our customers and our organization. And that doesn't necessarily need to be, something that management hands down to you. But some goals where you're trying to achieve strategic alignment, there does need to be an alignment, and it's a it's kind of this idea of a catch ball. You can sort of say, well, I heard this from you, and this is what it means in my context, and you can go the other way too. It's like, this is what if you really want to get more frequent product releases, this is what we need the organization to do. So that sort of communication between different spans of control in the organization is healthy, and it can be initiated by either party or by both parties in
Nice.
cooperation.
And then how do we like follow up on those, like okay, we have this objective, and I kind of see an analogy with in Sam Kainer's book about participatory decision making. He mentioned the overarching goal that you have, and then the
Yeah,
meeting goal, and they're like stepping stones to get to the overarching goal. How do we like iterate
yeah,
on, okay, we want to go from A to B to this target? Do we still have our regular cadence, our meetings where we focus on the current improvements, and do we do even more often that? Is it like a
yeah,
continuous improvement that we maybe check every day? I was reading up online again something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So the idea is, I mean, practically speaking, uh, if we're working in an agile context, we want to integrate that into our agile cadences so that we're doing improvements just like we want to do, you know, continuous integration and continuous um, code quality and all those things. We want to do continuous improvement and have it integrated with everything that we're doing. So with having set a goal, say we set our 6 month goal, and then maybe we set another goal that's a 2 month goal or something like that, or a 1 month goal, then we're going to want to make progress to that on a regular basis, perhaps a couple of 3 times a week. So every other day or twice a week, we would be huddling and saying, well, this is we had a step that we thought we could take without too much work, a few hours of work, and we thought that would take us a couple of days to get that done. How has that gone? What have we learned from that? And what do we want to do next? So you want to be checking in frequently, and then I also have this sort of idea, kind of standard of kind of conservation of meetings, right? We don't want to create a bunch more extra work because that starts to detract from our day-to-day work. So how can we do that more efficiently? And what Jesper Boag has suggested in his recent book on improvement kata for Agile is that teams have found good results with doing, basically they do their retrospective in the regular way kind of every other time. So if they're doing a 2 week sprint, then one sprint they just do a regular retrospective, looking backwards to learn and just focus on what happened in that sprint. Then the alternate sprint they use that. So if that's every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks they're saying, what's our next goal? So we're using that to set our what we call our target condition, kind of our next 1 month goal. And then in between we'd be meeting perhaps after our stand up twice a week, and just sort of we'd have our improvement board near to our work board, and we would look at that improvement and make sure that we're making progress on our improvements in
Cool,
little
cool. Yeah, this is
bite-sized
similar to
chunks.
like printing out. I like to print out the experiments that we run on our retrospective, printing out on the shared workspace so that people can see where we at. And one thing I liked, I don't know if it was in
Yeah,
Jasper's presentation or in yours, is like the difference between what can we improve and what we need to improve, which to me is key to retrospectives. But oftentimes we do like the whack-a-mole style. Oh, there's an action item here, action item there, action item, action item, action item, and it's all very disjoint
yes,
versus the focus
yeah,
on one target. And I guess the need, I mean, from what I was reading up, like it seems like this need comes from from kind of like reflecting a little bit more holistically, maybe as a company, this is a good target to go to. But I definitely like that we're not getting
Yeah.
sidetracked to all these other like shiny things, and we go to the target. But one of the problems I'm facing when I'm introducing this kind of mindset to teams that have been used to the three columns and action items is, well, I want to talk about my thing. And my thing might be as silly as someone left water on the table and there's mold in it, or today's raining,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I want to dedicate the same amount of time to
Yeah.
that to, well, something else that maybe is a bit more relevant to the learning. And so what I found is that I started using
Yeah.
like a continuous timeline, so that events are captured on that. And if there's something that can be done, then just do it. You don't need to wait for retrospective. In the improvement card, is there like a concept like that where you, I think you mentioned like uh, twice a week doing some of those reviews of like, if there is something that needs to be done, just do it. Don't wait for the end of the iteration to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to, and also don't try to plan it out like for the whole iteration, right? Just say, what's our next step going to be? And each time you're taking a fresh look toward your goal and seeing what's that next obstacle, or if it's still the same obstacle, what are we trying that's different to address that obstacle between us
Nice.
and our goal? And that's interesting, that because the part about like, well, I didn't like the dirty water glass or whatever, those things, I think that's kind of where Jesper's coming from. It's like there is value in the team being able to express its sort of emotional state, and I think that is one of the strengths of retrospective. So I don't think you want to make it all about goals and processes and outcomes, and that's why I think having a alternation of some at some cadence is a valuable way to be, especially as you're learning the new technique. So you maybe you can't switch fluidly between the two, or people aren't able to. But I think with the again, that with retrospectives, and that, like, sometimes it can be really frustrating if everybody just, it's fine if people are really upset about something they want to talk about one time, but if that's all you do every time, or if there's something really big going on in your business and yet that's what people are in a mood to talk about, that can be a not a productive place to be. Sometimes we need to put aside those
Yeah.
smaller concerns and focus on something bigger. And if you just leave it to the mood of the team, it's hard to find the right
Yeah.
balance or to
Yeah,
create the right
I totally
balance.
agree. I think it has to be like an outlet for, I think I think it's the aura that has the differentiation between objective and feelings events. So
Yeah,
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 so I think
relational.
they're
Yep.
important. They're both equally important. I actually asked this question to someone on the show. I think it was Diana, and that they're equally important. When you need to you need to reflect on both. I think what I've seen oftentimes is there's an overtake of, and retrospect, it kind of becomes this like happy hour time. It's at the end of the day, people are tired,
Yeah.
and eventually it feels like a waste of time. So it's good
Yeah.
that there's like this focus. Cool, awesome. I think maybe like, do you have a practical example of a client that you've maybe been working on for like several weeks or months that have kind of like move towards one of those target conditions, and some of the challenges they face that you want to share and you can share with the audience?
Sure. I mean, I've used Improvement Kata with different clients in different situations. One time I worked with an organization, and they were trying to change their release. They're basically trying to be more responsive, to release things to their customers when the customers, wanted them or needed them or could benefit from them. And these were mostly internal customers, and so the customers, they had a fair degree of visibility, and they were like, well, we asked you for this one little thing. Why does it have to go through your whole 3-week sprint, and then it has to go into the secondary testing process and be tested, and then it finally gets scheduled for release? And so the tiniest thing like takes at least a month for me to get. So it's great that you can do meaty features in a month, but also like the tiniest little incremental change is also taking a month. And so they looked at like, well, what they did over the course of time is to start looking at the contents of what was in their sprint and the big things and the little things, and say, can we imagine a future state where little things just get released immediately, and if they're not connected to anything else, if it's like a report where it's a read-only change and there's no possibility of this adversely affecting our business in any irreversible way, how can we get that turned around faster? And so over time, they made a series of small changes, both to kind of policies that didn't need to be the way they were,
And was that
and to
company
the
policy,
actual
like
method.
you said?
Yeah, like company policy basically said, you know, the business person responsible in the QA director need to sign off on everything that goes into production. And so basically, as a result, those things were all kind of getting bundled up into batches of a month's worth of work across multiple teams. And so, how can we unbundle those things? And they learned different ways to do that. They also learned in the process of making incremental steps toward this goal, they learned to find ways to schedule incremental releases that were off cycle. So, they'd sort of say, well, why can't we do, if the release has to happen at a time when the system is down for maintenance, or when the call center is closed, that the call center is closed every night. Why can't we do a release any night? It's like, well, we can only do it once a week or once a month. And so then they started looking at, well, why that was. And, it's because this person needs to be available. Well, can we automate the thing that person needed to be available for, so that we don't need to wait for his or her availability, and then we can do this any night instead of only on that scheduled night. And so those are
Nice.
examples of things that they looked at, again, looking, as you mentioned, toward a goal, rather than, well, what could we change because it's easy. It's like, well, in order to make releases happen at any night of the week, what do we need to change? And then figuring out, through a series of small steps, how can we work it out with those people that need to be there so that they don't need to be there, and that they are still okay with
Nice.
what we're doing, so that they have control over the script, but they're not needing
And
to actually run it.
was there like a task ambassador, someone that was owning this to go from A to B, or was it the whole team that kind of looked at different things and part of those updates?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that I like about the Toyota Kata and the Improvement Kata and Coaching Kata is that I think it brings together the role of the coach and the role of the manager. So I think it's unfortunate that in a lot of agile implementations, there's like the managers and they're bad people that try to tell everyone what to do, and they don't know about this. They don't think about systems and people. They only think about resources and tasks. And then there's these coaches who are sort of working in balance or opposition to the managers to kind of right the wrongs and try to heroically struggle things forward. But what Mike says at Toyota is that there's not difference. Like, there's not separate coaches. The coaching is the way that managers are taught to work, and so managers have respect for the people that are sort of closest to the work, because those are the people that can really tell them what's going on, and those people have respect for managers because managers have a problem solving, an ability to sort of facilitate problem solving and experience in that. And so it's not that one is superior to the other. You need both to work together, but having a third person who is neither one, who has to kind of work against the bad managers or whatever, is not, in my opinion, very healthy or productive. So what we see is that there's a more closer relationship between coaching and the work of improvement. And so sometimes it's the whole team, but often it's really the person who's in the Scrum Master role who kind of takes ownership of the process. But instead of saying like, oh, I can only facilitate teams and I can only raise impediments to managers, it's like, well, if you've been studying this process and you're an expert, then lead us, like tell us what the next thing to do is. And that's that isn't wrong and that isn't bad if the team is and the organization respect your opinion. It's okay to like lead us in the right direction and help us come along. And so bring the team members, the managers that you need for that particular improvement that you're working on. But it's not like a recipe like the whole team must do it or it doesn't count or it's not good. It's like, who are the right people to work toward overcoming the obstacle that you're facing at this moment.
Cool. Awesome. I really like that. And nice. Is there something like, if we had to start, if you had to like suggest someone that is on the audience and is interested, well, maybe I should try this next. What is some like concrete next step that you would suggest them to do? Like Jasper says, like switch out your current retro with like a more focused retro, and like phrase it like just we're gonna
Sure.
like shake up our retro. We're gonna give it like how would you frame it?
Yeah. Well, I guess I would couple of things. Assuming that you don't have like external coach or somebody to kind of like train you and teach you and bring you along, I would say try to find a learning partner, someone who can. So if you're going to be the Scrum Master and you are going to try to focus on solving the problem, facing the obstacles and figuring out what to do, then get somebody else who can help you sort of follow the new mental model so that you're not trying to do both those things at once. And then second thing is just practice this idea of setting goals by looking at, it's kind of like teleporting yourself into the future, whether that's 1 month or 3 months, and setting a goal and saying, well, in the future, things will be better than they are at present. In these specific ways, we'll get these improved outcomes by following these improved methods. And there's a little bit of an art to that. It's kind of like the difference between requirements and design, right? It's like you don't want to say how you're going to get there, all the specific steps you're going to take because you don't know, but like imagine a better future. So that's the key skill to sort of priming the pump and getting started, is you need to practice setting goals in a way that doesn't assume the way that you're going to reach those goals. And then you can then you can say, what are the obstacles to this goal that I've envisioned? And then you start working on the
Cool.
obstacles part
Nice.
of it.
And on the first point, I want to vouch for Linda Rising's Fearless Change book. I was interviewing her like a few episodes ago, and when she talks about introducing change and just do it, just start something, and some people will follow along, and then you have like a little group of people that can support each other. Cool.
Yeah,
So this is excellent. I think I have like a tough question for you. What if
yeah,
we start that, but and this is, I guess, applies for any organizational change, and we get pushbacks, and how how do we go with that? We just iterate, we try again. So in my experience, if we get like a lot of pushbacks, if there is stuff in the soup, we decide how to react to that, and then we as a team implement like a plan on how to react to certain events. We gather more data and we iterate on it, hoping there's like change,
sure,
something will change, we'll have more information. An example I was given is like there's this client that was saying, well, this is like a director that comes in and he basically gives us directions, deprioritize things, and it's really hard to manage. But if we come up with like a way to react as a team to that, then we can all align and say, okay, we understand that's a top priority for you. What should we work on next? But then someone say, well, what if like that director comes and say, well, you either do it or you're fired? And then I said, well, that's a new piece of information. Now we know that your director is willing to fire someone because they don't do what he says. So maybe you can go to HR, or maybe you can do something else. how do we iterate when we have those like long-term objectives and we find friction from or pushbacks from people collaborating?
Well, I mean, of course, there's a lot of different um, forms of resistance. It's a very general term, but I would say there's a couple of things with respect to the improvement kata that you have that you can use. One is that um, by doing it, if you're following the steps at each step, so you're saying like, well, we set this goal that's 3 months out. We set this goal that's a third or a quarter of the way there, and then every day we're collecting data about which obstacle we've worked on, whether that was successful or not. So at any point along the way, it's like if you think of a scientist, like if I go into a scientist and I say like, well, how's your research going? That person's going to be able to tell me like, well, this is my hypothesis, this is my research program, this is what I'm working on, this project, this is my logbook. Like it's all the data is there, right? So you can share that with the person who maybe is trying to stand in your way at any point, and you can bring them along. And if they may have more information that you don't have, and that may be why that director in your example is saying, well, I'm going to fire people if they don't do it my way, because he or she has what is perceived to be a very sort of overriding need. So if you have an overriding need, then you can either look at that overriding need as new information that you need to incorporate into your next target condition, or your next, or reset your challenge, or you can look at that overriding need as an obstacle, that this is an obstacle. Before we can make progress against our 3 month goal, we need to address this overriding need. Maybe there's something that we can do to make that happen, or maybe there's not. But you can either influence using data to change the minds or the thinking of people that might not understand what you're trying to do, or you can take into account new information that they bring you and either change your goal or see it as an obstacle
I
to be
love
addressed as
it.
part of your work.
And sometimes when we do some of those discussion, I remind the group like the prime directive, and that everyone does the best job they can given what they know at the time, their skills and abilities, the situation available, the resources. To me, that like focuses on context. So if your director wants to fire you because of that reason, so that's the I guess that's the event, and that happened. That's there. But what's the context of that event? Why did he want to fire you? I think asking those questions, getting that context, getting that data, helps reflect on a little bit of what I think is helping us to iterate over our goal.
Yeah, and and I think it's all about, that's the thing about the retrospective, is that it's all about, or the improvement kata is really all about building skills, right? And so maybe that director doesn't have the skills to influence things in any other way except through threats. But if you say like, well, we're doing things this way, and we can, having spoken to you, we can see why you have this goal, but we have a different means to reach that goal or part of that goal, then that becomes a potential for skill building,
Cool,
for that
awesome.
person, right?
Any final thing that you want to say that I didn't ask about the improvement kata?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think I just want to say that it's that when people try to connect with retrospectives, that it's compatible, and that it's the big ideas are that it's looking forward at a goal rather than backward at events, and that you are you know that your goal can be at different horizons, so you're not just solving one problem for this sprint, but you may be solving something that's bigger, and you're going to do it in small chunks. And so as you do that over time, of course, what you're doing in any given sprint will change. The methods, the techniques, the facilitation that you use is going to change as you're moving
Cool.
toward your longer
Awesome.
term goal.
So, final three questions I ask all guests. The first one is if you have a favorite retrospective activity.
Mm. Yeah, so activity, I mean, I don't know, activity or technique, but one thing that I get a lot of mileage out of is the pattern of called one place where I've seen it is in liberating structures, but it's 1, 2, 4, all. So where you say, okay, we're going to brainstorm individually, and then we're going to compare notes in pairs, and then we're going to have pairs of pairs compare notes, and then we're going to report out. And I think especially for people who are concerned that their facilitation is going to get away with them if they kind of let everybody talk, that's a good way to sort of have a bottom up kind of everybody gets to talk and participate, and then you kind of funnel it naturally to something that you can work with. And I think it's a good practice that I use all the time, and I think it's especially good for people that are branching out and trying new ways of facilitating and trying to
Nice.
spread the
What is
wings.
one book that you're reading right now, or you just finished reading?
Yeah, one book. Well, I of course there's the Toyota Kata books by Mike Rother and Jesper Boag's book. If you're interested in improvement kata, I recommend those. One book that I like that's sort of complementary is called Peak by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole, and that's a really good book. Basically, Anders Ericsson is a researcher, and he's the one who's kind of pioneered the study of deliberate practice. So it's a popular book, and it just talks about the way that people, use practice to build skill. And I think the way that connects to the improvement kata is like you're building this you're practicing using the scientific method and using data to make improvement in your everyday work and your everyday life. And one of the things that Ericsson says is that people that are good at doing things, as opposed to people that just kind of do things to get by, they have very explicit mental models about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. And so I think the improvement kata is a really impressive mental model. And
Nice.
I like
And the
that.
final question, Adam, what is your favorite dish?
Well, I think, I guess from a standpoint of just kind of all the senses, I think Ethiopian food is really delightful and has a lot of, it's just a really great experience, and it's really great food. And if people who haven't had that, or maybe you don't have that where you are, if you go to a place where there's an Ethiopian restaurant, I highly recommend that. But I think from a practical standpoint, it's got to be burritos because you can get them everywhere. They travel. You can make a lot of varieties. They're like sort of a perfect blend of nutrition, and they're pretty inexpensive. So if I was gonna like feed the world without a fuss, I'd have to go with burritos.
Our guests share lots of insights and ideas. Which change are you going to try in your next retrospective? Tell us on Twitter with hashtag #ThisIsRetrospectiveFacilitation, or leave us a comment on thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com. You can connect with Adam on Twitter at KnowledgeLean or on LinkedIn, Adam Light. Norm Kurt, known as the father of retrospectives and author of the book Project Retrospectives, suffered a disabling brain injury in a car accident 20 years ago. Visit thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com/helpnorm for details and a link on how to contribute to his fund. Thank you for listening. This is Enrico Teotti. Till next time.